What's up guys, and welcome to this Jigsaw inventory series. Today we're going to see how to create the inventory widget, add new equipment slot, etc. and also how to add the multiplayer component to our character, and then of course make sure that the inventory is recognized inside this component with of course all the containers or equipment slots recognized. So the multiplayer component handles replication automatically, and so we need to make sure that it's set up properly. Of course, it doesn't have to be multiplayer. This can also work for single player. So the first thing I want to do here, or the first thing I'm going to look at here is right here we have an empty map. So if I go ahead and play, as you can see, there is nothing going on. This is pretty much a third-person template with nothing in there. So all we have here is our movement for the character, and of course the player controller right here is empty, as you can see. So we're going to start by creating our inventory widget. So inside this tutorial folder, I'm going to add a new folder called widgets. And right here, I'm going to create a new widget. So right click here somewhere and do user interface and then widget blueprint. And then I'm going to name it something like BP main inventory tutorial, for example. So this is going to be my main inventory. So the first thing you want to do here is add equipment slot to your inventory. Now these equipment slots are things that can be equipped to your character, such as a helmet, armor, etc. And we can add as many containers as we need, or as many equipment slots as we need. As long as we set them up correctly inside the multiplayer component, we should be fine. I'm going to add maybe a helmet, armor, pants, backpack, primary and secondary for this example. So we're going to start by, of course, in your case, you probably want to do something cleaner, meaning add maybe some vertical boxes, some horizontal boxes, etc. In my case here, I'm going to keep things simple, and I'm going to work with a simple vertical box. So I'm going to place it, for example, right here. And what you want to do here is you want to add JSI containers. A JSI container is used here. It can be used as an equipment slot, or it can be used as an inventory slot. So for our equipment slots right here, we want a JSI container of type equip to, and we'll see that in the settings later. So I'm going to drag a JSI container and of course drag it over to the vertical box. And the first thing I want to do here is go to the settings, make sure you are selecting your JSI container. And the first thing I want to do here is change the container type to equip to. This way it is a 1x1 automatically, because it's an equipment slot. It doesn't have to be more than 1x1. And of course you want to change the slot size right here. So that's going to be 120 by 120, for example. Equipment item slot size is 60 by 60. This is the slot size of regular inventories. For example, a backpack inventory. It depends on what you want to do here, but by default it is 60 by 60. So just remember this value. Because the equipment slot is bigger, we also need to keep in mind or keep a reference to what is the default slot size on the regular inventory type. For example, if I change this to inventory and then go 5 by 5, this one right here, if I just change this to size to content, so this one right here would be 60 by 60. So it doesn't make sense to make it 120 by 20. So this is our regular inventory. It is 60 by 60 here. You can change it, of course, but in my case here, I'm going to leave it 60 by 60. This is my regular inventory. But for an equip to, I want it to be bigger, of course. So in this case, I'm going to go 120 by 120. But I need to keep a reference to what is the inventory size. In this case, 60 by 60. And this is, of course, used in the drag operation just to keep things consistent. In this case, 120 by 120 should work fine for our helmet here. Right here you can add some text to indicate what this is for, but in my case here I'm going to change the container name here to helmet right here. And if I do that, it should show right there, and I can of course change the font as well, maybe something bigger, 12. So that should work just fine. Next we're going to jump over to the supported item types right here. So we're going to click on the plus sign here and indicate what items are supported by this container. In this case, since it is a helmet, I'm going to select helmet right here. So it only only helmets can be equipped to this container. only item of type helmet. Later, when we work with pickups, we'll see how to change item types. In this case, you can also indicate certain item IDs from the data table. You don't have to indicate a type, you can indicate an item ID. So only support these IDs, and you can add multiple. You can also use the do not support item IDs here to maybe have some exceptions. For example, even though the item type is helmet, maybe you don't want to support a certain ID or IDs. You can add the multiple here. Now the other settings are of course based on your preference. Feel free to change these however you want. So the only thing that we care about here is the container type being an equip to slot. Change the slot size to whatever you want, and then indicate the supported item types or supported item IDs. I'm going to rename this container to GSI underscore helmet, and then I'm going to simply copy paste this blueprint around. So we're going to do a copy, then paste, and then I'm going to rename this to armor. And of course, I'm going to select this armor container and then change this to armor and change the type here to armor. So it only supports armor. So I went ahead and added the other container. So it's pretty much the same thing, just copy pasting and changing the container name if we want to. And of course, changing the supported types here. So that's going to be, instead of armor, it's going to be pants here. And this is going to be backpack. And of course, I'm going to add a primary and a secondary as well. For the primary and secondary here, it's going to be a different size, of course. So I'm going to do GSI there. I'm going to name it primary. In this case, there are two options. We can keep it at 1 by 1. We don't mind that. Or it is 1 by 1, but in terms of size, we can keep it 120 by 120. Depends on your preference. But in this case, I'm going to keep the container similar, or the container size similar to the item itself, meaning a rifle or whatever. A rifle is usually a 5 by 2 or something like that. So in this case, I'm going to adapt that to this. So in this case, I'm going to do maybe 300 by maybe 120. So that would be, for example, my primary slot. We can also go the other way around. So for example, 120 here and 300 there. But for this setup right here, what you need to do is you need to enable rotate equipped image. So when the item is equipped, of course, the weapon is rotated to match the container size. But in our case here, we're going to leave it like so, simple. Of course, select the primary here. In this case, this primary, we can make it so it supports a rifle and also maybe a pistol as well. You can also make it support melee as well. So it depends on your game and what you want. So it should work either way here. It's just a matter of handling that correctly inside the character, which we will see in the next videos. And I'm going to simply duplicate this container and paste it over there. And this is going to be my secondary. And it's going to support the same thing. So secondary. So this is going to be my inventory for now. Of course, like I said, feel free to customize the widget however you want. Later, we will see how to add content of equipped items, such as a backpack. So when I equip a backpack, I want to show maybe the content of that backpack somewhere here. So since it is a widget, if you know how to work with widgets, you should be able to customize this the way you want it. But we'll do something simple, maybe just add a section here for content like we have in the demo. Either way, it should work just fine. The method is what matters. So the next thing we want to do here is add a background widget. So it's going to be, if you search there in the palette, look for back, and you should have a drop item back G widget. This is important later when we want to drop something to the ground. For example, an equipped item or something from our inventory. We have this widget right here that handles that part. It handles maybe showing like how much you want to drop, if the item is stackable, etc. So we want to make sure that we add it first, so it's underneath everything. So we're going to drag the drop item package widget right here, so it's first, like so. And then in the anchors here, I'm going to hold Control and click on this section right here, so it fills in the entire widget. So now it's filled in, and we have a blur value right there. If you don't like blur, set it to 0. In my case, I'm going to do something like 0.2 right there. So let's just go ahead and name it GSI dropping items. So that's going to be the name. So we're pretty much done with this section right here. We will work on it later when we handle pickups and equipment items, etc. But for now, what we need to do here is go to the graph section, click on class settings, and we want to add, so what we want to do here is add an interface called GSI special widget interface. So once we do that, so this is very important. This is how the component or the multiplayer component communicates with this inventory. So once we do that, we should have a section here and the interfaces, and we have a couple of functions. We don't have to handle all of them. We only need to handle a couple for the time being. So the first thing we want to do here is handle the get list of containers, and this is going to be used to return all the containers that we have on our inventory. Right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 containers, and we need to return all of them. So all you have to do here is drag a pin from here and do make array, and then of course add all necessary pins right there. So of course the order here doesn't really matter, but I'm going to drag it like so. So helmet, armor, pants right here, then backpack like there, and of course finally our primary and secondary containers. So this is very important, get list of containers, and you return all your containers. Next, the get list of non-add containers. This function right here is used to exclude certain containers and maybe mark them as special. For example, if I have a stash, like if you played the demo, we have a stash container there. And we use this function to make sure we don't add items there if we pick up something off the ground. We don't want to add it to the stash container because that's considered a special container that may be turned on certain areas, etc. So we can use this function to indicate that that container is not part of the default or regular containers of the character. So in this case, we don't have any special containers. These are my equipment containers, and they should be considered for everything. So in that case, I don't return anything. So we can do make container here, delete, and there you go. So here we're returning nothing. We don't have anything special. All my containers here are to be considered for everything. Next here we have get drop widget. This is where you return this widget right here, the drop G widget. So we named it GSI dropping items, and that's what you want to return here. So as you can see, it takes in a drop item back G widget, which is what we added earlier. Finally, we want to handle the get GSI container by player slots. This function is used to return a specific container based on a certain slot. Now all you have to do here is, so it wants the container, so we can do select. We can use a select node here, and this is an enum of player slots. So if you do equal here, you're going to see that we have primary, secondary, pistol, melee, etc. Your of course regular player slots, and you can add more if you need to. It's just an enum. So what we can do here is we can simply use the select node here. Since it takes in a wildcard, if we plug in the enum here, it's going to fill in automatically the container based on, or the option based on this enum right here. So these are just enums, and we were going to match the value based on, of course, the result there. So primary, we do have a primary here, so we're gonna do that. Secondary right there. We don't have a specific pistol slot, so we don't care about that. So GSI pants, we do have pants right here. So helmet is considered headwear in general, so the general type. It doesn't have to be a helmet necessarily. So headwear is going to be the helmet there. We have a backpack. Where is the backpack? Right there. So one more, that's going to be the armor. So like there. Of course, to make sure that this is valid, we can also promote it to a local variable, and we can call it container or container ref, for example, just to avoid errors. So we're going to do is valid right here. If it's not valid, I can just return nothing. That is our container reference, and that's what we're going to use right there. Equipped item, to get the equipped item from the container, we can simply do get equipped item ref. And to get the pending here, we can get it from here. So we have a is pending, is item pending, but this might not be valid. So if there's nothing equipped, we can of course use this. Otherwise, we'll get a runtime error. So for that, what we're going to do here is we're going to promote this to a variable. So do promote to local variable pending. And I'm going to use a sequence, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this right here if this is valid. So if this is valid, If this item is valid, then I'm going to check if it's pinned in like so. So what we did here is the container reference, which is the equipment container, based on the slot or player slots here. So we have that right there, we return it. Then the equipped item, we get it from the container reference, which is get equipped item ref. This could be valid or non-valid. If the item is not equipped, it's not going to be valid. But since we also need to know if the item is pinned in, and we also need this to be valid, that's why we first check if it's valid, set that, and then put it here, just to avoid runtime errors. And that's pretty much all we need to do right now. So we're going to go ahead and compile, save, and now we can go to the character, and we can add the multiplayer component. So we're going to do add component and look for that multiplayer jig or BP jig multiplayer. So this container handles all the interactions that happen inside our inventory and also handles replication automatically. So all we have to do here is indicate that inventory widget class right here, and we named it main inventory tutorial. So we'll add it here, and now we need to set our container settings. This is where we indicate our containers or equipment slots that we have on our inventory. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to add 6 containers here. So this is server side, of course. We can indicate a container name or container ID. So this is going to be used when we handle what happens when you equip like a helmet, for example. So we're going to use the container name to know that it's a helmet or a primary, etc. And we'll see that in the next videos. For now, you need to indicate the container name. In this case, it's going to be helmet. I'm just going to do everything uppercase here. So column and row. So as you know, we can either have an equip to slot, and we can also have a regular container. If you see in our demo, in the default demo of the project, the secure container is not an equip to. It is a normal inventory. So in this case, that's where you indicate if the container or the dimensions of the container. However, if the container is an equip to, which is our case on all of these containers, you can simply indicate -1, -1. So -1, -1 means that the container is an equipment or equip to type, which is the case here for all of them, of course. If the container is not an equip to, like the secure container that we have in our demo, in that case, you need to indicate the dimensions of that container. So this is very important. So the component kind of knows how to check if an item can be added or not. But in our case here, it should be set -1, -1 because it is an equip to type. Same thing for everything here. So -1, -1, and the container here is going to be armor. So it's going to be pants. Once again, -1, -1. So that's pretty much all we need to do here. We can also indicate starting items. If you want to start by default with an item equipped or added in your inventory, you can also do it from here, and we'll do it later. So for the time being, the 2 very important steps are to indicate the inventory widget and make sure that the interface, like we set up earlier, is added, and indicate your containers right here. Very important. And we want to make sure that we do allow drop-in items. Of course, if this is our inventory, we do want to allow drop-in items. For example, drop in an equipped item or something from our backpack. Since the same component can be used inside a vendor or a crafting station or a loot container, some of these settings are specific to those type of actors. So if we have a special container, such as maybe a secure container that you don't want to be looted while, if dead, of course, you can indicate it right here. Let's say, for example, that I don't want my backpack to be looted or to be available for loot if your player dies. So you can simply indicate, so backpack is number 3, and you can simply indicate here 3. And this will prevent, of course, that specific container from being part of the loot table or the loot content. And exclude main container indexes from vendor currency. This, as you can see there, currency received from vendors will not be added in these containers. So in the demo, if you buy something off a vendor, or if you sell something to the vendor and you receive that money, the money will not be added to your stash container because it's considered as kind of a hidden container. So you can also indicate those containers right here, for example. And finally, very important, MP component type, that should be main character. So once again, this container camp is used in multiple cases, such as a loot container, a vendor, a crafting station. The same container is used, which makes it easier to communicate between all these actors. And that's pretty much all we need to do here. So with these settings, the inventory should be working as intended with the multiplayer component. So now all we need to do here is just add a way to show the inventory or add the inventory to the viewport. So we can add, for example, the tab key, and we can use it to show the inventory widget. So we can use the multiplayer right here, and we can get the widget, so get inventory widget. And so that's going to be our inventory widget. So the component will create the inventory automatically here. So all we need to do here is just do is visible. If the inventory is visible, we're going to remove it from the viewport. So we're going to do remove from viewport or remove from parent. If it's not visible, then we're going to add it to the viewport. And of course, we need to show the mouse cursor and change the input type when the inventory is added to the viewport. So all we need to do here is when we add it to the viewport, we need to get the player controller and change the input type here. So set input mode, and this is going to be game NUI. And if it's removed from the viewport, we're going to change the input mode here to game only. So input mode, game only. And of course, we're going to show the mouse cursor when the widget is, and in this case, it's going to be false, and in here, it's going to be true, like so. So that's pretty much all we need to do here. So far, we can already play and then hit tab and see our containers right there. Of course, we can press tab once again to show and hide our inventory. And with just these settings, our inventory is already ready to go, replicated automatically. In order to control every action that happens in our inventory, we need to add 3 interfaces. One of them, of course, is specific to the multiplayer component. So what you want to do here is go to class settings inside the character, and then you want to add the BP jig component. So we have BP jig MP component interface. This interface right here, if we expand the interface section, we have MP component interface. We have a couple interface functions. These functions right here are called for whenever something happens inside our inventory. For example, as you can see here, we have jig MP on item consumed, pickup item removed, pickup item added. When we equip a pickup, for example, if there's a weapon on the ground and we pick it up and it got equipped to our inventory, this function right here triggers. It tells us what the container name is. The container name, of course, is this one right here. As you can see, it is this right here, container name. So if this is a helmet, for example, then we know what to do. We have the information about what got equipped. So all of these functions will be handled in the next videos when we talk about pickups, loot containers, etc. Other interfaces that we need to add here are the character interface. So the MP jig character interface. These functions right here are used for certain interactions. For example, when you load a save, when you walk too far from a loot container, when you loot a container, etc. We will handle these functions accordingly, of course, on our next videos. So the final interface function or interface that we need to add to our character, it's called the interaction interface. So BP MP interact interface. This interface right here is used for looting other players, and we'll handle this and on that specific video, of course. So for the time being, that's all we need to do. So already here, we can select the multiplayer component and go, for example, to helmet and say that we want to start with a helmet equipped by default. So we can do helmet, which is of course inside the armor data table. For now, we're going to say that our character starts with a helmet by default, spawn chance 100%. In this case, we're going to use simply the begin play, make sure that we are locally controlled. So is locally controlled. So making sure that we are a local player. And next, we're going to use the multiplayer component and do request data. So we have server request data and request data from a save. So if you save your game, you can use the request from a save. So in this case, we're going to request So we're going to use the normal request data here. So it's asking for a component. We're going to simply pass the same thing. So this is obviously used for testing purposes. Ideally, maybe you want to call this automatically from the server to send your inventory data. So this is only used if you have starting items like so. If you don't have any starting items, you don't need to use this. So this should work, but we have one mistake here that we need to solve here. So if we go to the armor data table and look for that helmet, we can see that the type is set to headwear. Now headwear is the general type. So we need to make sure that this is the supported item type and not helmet specifically. So for that, in that case, we need to go back to our inventory here and make sure that headwear is the supported type, not helmet. So there you go, headwear is going to be the type that is supported right there. So, and let's go ahead and give it a try here, and we should now have a helmet equipped by default, as you can see there. So we do have our helmet equipped by default, and as you can see, the character doesn't have a helmet equipped, and that's going to be handled on our next video, where we also handle pickups. So that's going to happen inside the character, and of course this is also is going to be based on your own preference on how you want to handle this kind of things, such as a helmet being equipped to your character. Maybe you prefer a certain method. So we'll see how to handle that on our next video. But for now, to make the context menu work, we need to add one more thing to our character, which is the jig context menu component. And now we have access to our options here, for example, the inspect, and this automatically works. So I don't want to make this video too long. We'll talk about inspecting items and how to set those up in our other videos. Of course, this series is going to cover everything, hopefully, but for the time being, that's pretty much all we need to do. So simple steps: add the JSI containers and add the JSI interface here and handle its functions, and add the multiplayer component and indicate your containers here with the name, of course, and if it's an equip to -1 -1. Also indicate that inventory widget right here, and simply request the data if you have any starting items. If you don't have any starting items, you don't have to do this step. And finally, add the jig context menu in order to for our context menu to work. And of course, the interfaces here, which we haven't handled yet. That's going to be our topic for our next video, along with pickups. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Make sure you watch the other videos in order to understand more about this system. So until the next one, thank you for watching. Stay safe. See you later. Goodbye.